Greetings, programmers. Welcome to TCoffeeAndCode for Wednesday, 2nd of June, 2021. Warranty disclaimer, I'm not going to read this. Basically, we're going to have a conversation. It's going to be hopefully interesting, and things are subject to change, my opinion, etc. I did want to update everybody. We have some changes in the near future on TCoffeeAndCode schedule. The data visualizations was a couple weeks ago, and there were some technical issues, so we're going to redo that one, not next week, but the week after, so the 16th. Data visualizations re-visualized. And also we moved that was when working with Apple M1 was scheduled, so I've moved that out and then moved the blockchain NFT out a little bit further as well. Working with Apple M1, I've ordered an Apple M1, but it wasn't going to get here in time, so it should get here this week, and then that will give me time to get content prepared around that. As you probably aware, on the roadmap in 10.5 schedule, which is the next major release of Rad Studio, we are adding M1 Mac support. So that's something to look forward to. So I don't know if I'll be doing any beta, alpha, sneak peeks in that session, but in the near future I will be. But definitely in that session, we'll be looking at options as far as what you can do today with running. So Parallels has updated to work on the M1 Mac, and so you can run the Windows 10 ARM under Parallels on the M1 Mac. And Windows 10 ARM was recently updated as well to add 64-bit Windows support. So it'll run Win64 applications, Windows Delphi, and Windows 10 applications on that. So that kind of just gives you a sneak peek of what you can do today before the release of 10.5, and then we'll also at some point in the future be looking at 10.5 native support on it as well. Should be some good stuff coming up, and then I'll have more topics in the future as well. I'm the chief developer advocate for Embarcadero, longtime software developer, do lots of fun and cool stuff, and work with amazing people like Miguel and the MVPs. So that's great. Miguel, real quick, why don't you tell us real quick about you for everybody that may or may not know who you are?
Sure, of course. I'm an electrical engineer, working mostly on embedded systems. IoT devices lately is now what has replaced embedded systems. It's the same thing now that everything must connect to the internet. Now they call it IoT, but basically embedded systems. Also a Delphi and C++ developer for a long time, including assembler when I have to deal with a low-level code. But definitely since Delphi came out, I took what everybody says is you have the power of C and C++ with the simplicity of Visual Basic. So that stands true even today, meaning I barely have to go to low-level libraries only when really needed, but as much as possible, I stay on Delphi, and especially now that it's multi-platform, it's been a huge advantage. Since all of you that are Delphi developers know it, that it's the hidden tool of many companies even today. So, so here I am, MVP for a long time, and have met Jim in person and trying to follow him and the rest of the MVP community.
That's right. We did meet at Code Rage in Scotts Valley a few years back, didn't we?
2014. That's it, correct. Yeah. That was the transition year for you with David I.
Yes. Yep. I love working with Miguel and other MVPs, and it's always great getting to meet him, but I can't always keep track because I talk to everybody so much online. It's like, if I met you in person, I don't remember. So yeah, that's right. I remember that actually, now that you mentioned it, because I remember you did that session on FireDAC, and I learned a lot. I was like, wow, this is like some really amazing stuff you were talking about there about FireDAC. And then you did FireDAC with the ETL one. Was that last week?
And the impressive thing, Jim, is still many people don't know something that was introduced. Well, it was introduced with AnyDAC and FireDAC by itself. I mean, it had this feature already when it was acquired by Embarcadero, well, Code Gear, and then renamed to FireDAC. But when I was last week with the ATL presentation, I was surprised to see that still many Delphi developers don't know this core feature. And the original developer modeled the Fireduck scripting engine against SQL Plus by Oracle. So it's 80–90% compatible with that tool, which is the industry standard for SQL scripting. But I was surprised to find that many don't know yet. And many even claim if we could schedule later a webinar or something focused just on that, which is something we need to talk about later.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. Definitely, we'd love to talk about that. So Chris is asking, what does MVP stand for? So it's either most valuable professional or most valuable programmer. I've heard it go both directions. I don't know. What does it mean to you, Miguel? I'll say most valuable professional programmer person. Oh, I think you're muted.
Yeah, it's a catch-all word. But basically, all the industry have standardized on using this word. But to me, it's really, I would rather use, based on what you do with the, since now you're the evangelist of Delphi developers and C++ developers, I would take a hint on that and say it's those enthusiasts that try to promote the product and try not only to exploit the product to its best, but spread the knowledge of how to exploit it to the best for the rest of the users, to the community. I think that's what makes a little different about MVP, trying to share that knowledge and encourage people to make the best use out of
it. I describe MVPs as enthusiastic expert end users, because that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for an MVP candidate. Is I want somebody that is just like so excited about what they're doing that they're like, grabbing people on the street. Did you see this? Look at this. This is so amazing. And that's what I'm looking for, is people that just get so excited about it, about what the technology and what they're doing and stuff like that, that they're experts on it and that they are using Delphi C++ Builder day in, day out. So Microsoft,
yeah,
David,
correct.
says Microsoft most valuable professionals. He says, I like to think of MVPs as the most valuable person that helps developers. Yes, totally agree, David. So great to see you on, David. And I saw Yilmaz as well, another MVP online. This is a Q&A discussion. The idea is that the conversation will be driven around your questions. So do put your questions in the question panel, and we will potentially answer them, hopefully discuss them. I am totally down with, if you ask a question, the answer of, that's a good question, let's figure it out, is potentially the answer. I don't claim to have all the answers, but I'm willing to experiment, and with Yilmaz and David and Miguel chiming in, I'm sure we can answer all the questions eventually. So, grab a beverage and relax. Actually, I'm not using it today, but I did want to have a shout out to, Zach Briggs sent me this of Delphi Mystics, which I've done a couple things with Delphi Mystics. My thing is filtering it out. DelphiMystics.com, check it out. He sent me a cool mug. And if you know me, I have a drinking problem, so this is my mug of water I drink from. As long as my drinking problem's isolated to water, I'm not too worried about it. But
quite a big mug.
Yep, I had a slightly smaller one, but I had it full of ice water and dropped it, and the metal straw went through the bottom of the mug because it hit so much force and just punched a hole in the bottom. So I had to get a new mug and upgraded to the biggest one now. Oh, and I will go ahead and address the nose in the room. I have a scar on my nose, or a gash on my nose. I developed vertigo as a result of my concussion last year. And yes, a couple weeks ago, I was walking and just lost my balance from vertigo and face planted right into the wall. Didn't break it, but split my nose open. It's a lot better than it was, but can't really hide it. I thought about putting a Band-Aid over or whatever. I was like, no, whatever. It is what it is. We all have noses. We've all been hurt. So
definitely, we all have looked worse than that, so don't worry.
Yeah. I just for those things that I know everybody's gonna be seeing it. It's like, what's going on with Jim's nose? So yeah. All right, so I do have a poll question here. And let me get the poll question up here about scripting languages. So what scripting language do you use, if you use any, I guess? Maybe I should have added that as well. Whether or not you use any scripting languages at all, which is entirely possible. So Chris suggested donate some gadgets with every new license sold or every renewal of subscription. That would be fun. Andrew said, I thought you got the nose from flying backward down the Death Star trench in the background. Yeah, that's right. Should look where I'm flying.
Jim, would I mind asking why you didn't include Object Pascal here?
You know what? I should have. You're right, because Object Pascal, there is a lot of Object Pascal scripting.
Actually, many of the developers implicitly use it every time they use fast reports or the good old rate reports.
That's true. That's actually a really good point. Well, and so we can definitely talk about that. And that's kind of what I wanted to just kind of get some,
Sure.
conversation sort of thing. But yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, sure. I mean, tools like the reporting tools, that's what many that don't know exactly what a scripting engine is. Fast reports and rate reports, the good old rate reports, both come with a built-in scripting engine, and it's Object Pascal. Now, that is regardless, you decide to add scripting to your own application and install either an open source like the Pascal script or any of commercial ones like TMS softwares. But those reporting tools have its own already built in, and most users have to use it if you want to create advanced reports.
Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and close it. Well, I'm still getting some more votes coming in. So we're about 50% of the votes in, and JavaScript is in the lead with other. See, it's probably Object Pascal. I should add another poll to ask if it's Object Pascal. Nobody's using Lua. Lua was really big a few years back. It's still making games, interestingly. I'm surprised how often I see games that either the game system or the mod system for the game uses Lua script. I'm not sure why that is about Lua. I don't know a whole lot about it. But JavaScript is the number one, followed by other, followed by Python. So I will share the results of the poll so everybody can see it there. So yes, Alice pointed out TMS has a tool set for scripting. So I don't have a lot of slides for this, but I am definitely down with pulling up web pages to talk about stuff. And if everybody has things they want to mention and stuff as well. Yeah, TMS scripter. Oh, let me share my screen again. Stop, hide the slide, show my screen. Okay, so TMS scripter, I guess this is the product page. TMS software.
It's Script Studio.
Yeah, Script Studio. And actually, TMS has a few things. So first of all, I love all the tech partners, even the ones that have like one little small thing. They're amazing. That's one thing I love, is that you can probably find a component for whatever you want to do with Delphi. It makes it amazing where you can just drop some components in the form. So I don't want to downplay any tech partners, but TMS is one of those tech partners that if you're not aware of what they have, you really need to go check it out, because they have such a huge selection of things here. Scripter, there it is.
Maybe some of the audience can drive us better with some of their questions, but I would start by just highlighting that what a scripting tool is. Did you have any slide about that? So we can have a brief introduction.
I did want to talk about that. The idea that a script. So that's a good place to start. Why would you want to combine scripting with native? So we all know, the reason, one of the things that makes Delphi amazing is that it is compiled to machine code, right? You can compile it down to native ARM code for mobile devices, native x86 code for Windows and for desktops. And that gives you good performance, good memory management, and all that great stuff. But while scripting doesn't, there's some JIT compiles where it try to compile it just in time and stuff like that. But I guess why would you want to script things? It really, for me, there's two things it comes down to. One is that last minute customization, right? The ability to make changes that aren't tied to, don't need to be pre-compiled in. And so that'd be one. But what else would you say would be reasons behind scripting and the advantages of scripting, Miguel? Why would somebody maybe want to include scripting in their application?
Well, I'll go back to the core question, the example, but before that, yes, just elaborate on the description you just made. A scripting engine is one that allows you to run custom code with a runtime interpreter, meaning you don't need to compile. Basically, it means most of the times that it's run directly either on an application or in a shell. So if you are in the good old Windows command line, those batch files now, technically speaking, are script files. In the old days, we just call them batch files or command files, but technically nowadays, you will find the references. This is a script that is run by the shell. But then the shell will only recognize specific commands, which are the ones that you usually would put together on the script. Now, if you go with a more advanced shell like Powershell, then the syntax and the commands are even more, the set of available commands. But this is a good point because usually in the past, only shells, operating system shells, good old DOS, then Windows command line, and then Linux, used to have this scripting ability where you call all the commands in one single file, and then the shell was able to take that text file and run by one all of those commands interactively. But then the thing is that in your application, you might find the need that the end user needs to have some flexibility for some specific features that require can be minor or can be complex logic that he needs to customize on your program. So the easy way to do it, instead of having to create a custom plugin or instead of having to create a custom binary for that user, is instead you create a generic engine that then he or she can plug in this script file that will run the commands that you allowed him to run with the scripting engine that you implemented in your program. So I'll go back to that very example that most users will recognize immediately. When you're creating reports in fast reports or rate reports, you can go by using the GUI designer and have all the bands and all the body of your reports and the images, but you'll have a very, very simple report. But when you need even the slightest of the complexity added advanced features into your report, like having a label that changes depending on the group that you are summarizing against, or you want the shaded color of the background to change depending on the number of the page. These minor things require you to go into the scripting engine that it's inside it. And all of them support Object Pascal, so you don't deviate from your familiarity with Object Pascal. Then that's a good example because many users must have used this feature at one time in their life if you are using some kind of advanced complexity in your report. So that's the way these report vendors solve that issue. How do you add the flexibility for the end user to get advanced results that are totally up to you, the specific rules on which you want to change a color on the background, or the specific rules on which you want to run a label to show or not to show at all? It's up to you. So then the scripting engine gives you the total power, and it's not, the vendor doesn't have to create super advanced functions, but instead they plug in the scripting engine, and then the product will recognize your script and then follow up accordingly. So this is a very good example. And again, Jim, this is the very reason why scripting is available in gaming engines, because then you can also add some custom features or custom functionality to your game. Yeah. And one point here, just to remind to the audience, is Lua, from what I read, is one of the reasons it became so popular for gamers is gamers mostly are not developers, and they are, in the good word, they are lazy in terms that they don't want to learn something advanced like C or C++ or even JavaScript, because JavaScript, let's remember, is modeled against C++ and C. So they want something so simple that then there was this group of gamers. Actually, it was in Brazil. That's what Lua is moon in Portuguese. So there was this gamers. Yes, Lua is moon in Portuguese, Brazilian Portuguese. So these guys created this project. I think it was in a university, but it was a group of gamers. And they modeled this against Pascal. If you see, Lua is 80% Pascal, just like Python. It's a Pascalish programming language. So it's so simple to learn that that's why it took off. So it's this industry standard, de facto standard for gaming.
It's interesting. You look at programming languages and you see you have the JavaScript curly brace club, right? That's the Java, but then everything else, it's like, oh, that's very much Pascal-like. And there are common ancestries, Ada and such, that did inspire all of them. So maybe not necessarily directly inspired by that, but it's interesting to see if it's not in the curly brace club, it really, you look at it, you're like, oh, this makes sense to me as a Object Pascal developer. So I never thought about Lua as being, I was going to see if they had some like a simple hello world type thing on here.
And for any computer advocate that has a little knowledge of reading on the history, one of the main reasons of why Pascal became so famous is, number one, it's elegant and it's simple to read. But the number two is a single pass compiler. So implementing a compiler in Pascal is very fast and very simple. You don't get into complexities. So Lua is modeled against all these features of Pascal. That's why Lua is very simple to implement and fast for gaming.
There we go. Now that does look rather Pascal-like.
Are you showing something? It doesn't show.
Oh, is it not showing? Oh, why is it not showing?
No.
What am I showing? Oh, I'm showing the wrong.
Wrong monitor?
That's weird. It swapped around what display it was showing. Sorry about that. Oh, by the way, is my audio okay? I was having some audio issues earlier. I think I tried to fix it. Hopefully I did. Does it sounding good?
You sound pretty good. This session you have sound pretty good. No, not cutting or stuttering at all.
All right. I spent so much time trying to get my audio working right, but it seems like it's always not working. So yeah, so there's a simple Lua script there. Definitely looks a little Pascal-like. So yeah, some great reasons. That's great. There's some great things about scripting. I was actually, you mentioned Fast Report. I was just talking to a Delphi developer the other day that it was a really interesting conversation actually, and I did an interview with him. I need to get published, but he was talking about the fact that he doesn't see himself as a programmer. He sees himself as a solution provider, right? His goal is not to write code. He did something because I don't get paid to write code. I get paid to fix problems. And I was like, that's a really good point. And so he saw a problem in the industry, or in the industry he was familiar with, and so he made some software to fix it. And he says he loves Delphi because it's so easy to just grab the pieces and put them together. And that's one of the things that's great about Delphi is, earlier you mentioned Delphi is kind of the combining the best of VB and Visual C++, right? And so the VB element is that rapid development where you just drop some components and connect things together. So I like to say that Delphi is the original low-code programming tool for people that like to write code sometimes, because that's the great thing, is that you can do so much with so little code, but then if you want to, you can write as much code as you want to, and so you're not limited, which is a big deal to me. But one of the things, I was talking to this guy though, he said he just discovered Report Builder, I think it was Report Builder, had scripting support, and he'd been using just it as a high-level reporting tool, and just generating reports, and then discovered he could customize the reports by putting scripting in there. And he's like, this changes everything, because that just gives you so much more power in there. And there's, technically speaking, any Turing complete programming language, which most all programming languages are, can do anything. But some languages have a different way of expressing things that open or make more suited for certain things. So technically you can do anything in Delphi, for example, but sometimes there are some things that being able to express them in a different programming language, like SQL, for example, like the local SQL and the scripting you're talking about with FireDeck. Some of that stuff gives you the ability to accomplish things with less code or accomplish things in a way that makes more sense or is easier to understand. So yeah, that's great stuff there. So a lot of people talk about PowerShell. PowerShell is amazing. I use PowerShell a lot as well. I was at the Microsoft, I want to say it was back when they called it PDC, Professional Developer Conference, when they introduced PowerShell, when they called it Monad. I think I still have a little bit of Monad swag around someplace from when they introduced it. Really cool. It's if you're not familiar with PowerShell, it is based on the Bash and Linux shells, Unix and Linux shells, in this idea that you can pipe things together, and very inspired by that. But it's not piping it as text, it's piping it as objects, which is kind of a little more kind of fairly powerful. It's got some weird syntaxes to it, but once you get past that, it's really, really powerful what you can do with it. And then Chris says he uses PowerShell, or Chris, yeah, PowerShell and WPS. I'm not familiar with WPS. Did he ask? Are you familiar with WPS, Miguel?
VBS, Visual Basic Scripting. Yes, that is very popular in the Windows arena. Oh. And many code is published. It's fading out since PowerShell came out. But in the 90s, it was, I would say, it was the top scripting engine that was not, when you did require some advanced programming, because this is the point. Originally, the Windows command line, let's call it the original Windows shell, not the PowerShell, but the Windows shell, was almost a copy borrow of the good old MS-DOS. So the power was very limited. So at that time, you wanted to do something very advanced, you went to VBS because it was built in even since Windows 95. So the runtime engine for scripting with VBS was introduced at the very same time as Visual Basic. So that was your option if you wanted to do something advanced in the command line, the simple MS-DOS commands. But then PowerShell came in, and nowadays I've seen Visual Basic scripts only on they've been running for a long time, but not for new projects. New projects, most people will turn to PowerShell.
So I misread it. It's WBS, which is Windows Scripting Host. Wait, I said it wrong. Hold on, let me try it one more time here. He elaborated on it. WBS, yeah, Windows, or WSH, Windows Scripting Host, which is
okay. The Windows Scripting Host is the technology where you can register a scripting engine, one of them being VBS. So the host itself is uploading let's call it the personality, same as the RAD Studio. So the Windows Scripting Host must have some personality register, and usually it's by the extension. So if you have a VBS extension on a file, and you have the Visual Basic Engine register on the Windows Scripting Host, then it would automatically run that using that engine. And the other one that is now also pre-registered in Windows machines is JS, the JavaScript one. So those are like the already pre-registered in Windows Scripting Host. There is some open source projects that allow you to also register an Object Pascal script engine for Windows Scripting Host, WHS. They have not taken off because you have PowerShell. So if you have, it's basically for system administrators that work with Windows servers or that want to automate some installation script. So then they would prefer go with the standard, which is PowerShell. Now, there is one thing here. Installers, and it comes to my mind, InnoSetup. They also have a scripting engine built in, and InnoSetup is modeled against Object Pascal. But all installers have a script. You define actually how the installer works by defining a script. Then the installer will simply pre-compile it into the actual executable of the installer. But the logic of how you're installing and what to do, it's defining a script by the installer itself.
Yeah, David Cornelius, another MVP, commented about that. He uses InnoSetup's Pascal script quite a bit. InnoSetup's it's made in Delphi, very, very popular installer. There's a few installers. I find a lot of very utilitarian programs, programs that are, just really useful are written in Delphi. It's interesting how often that happens. And then let's see, Gerard commented about, make sure I'm sharing the right screen. I am, all right. Python on Tiobe has been climbing quite a bit, which is true. It is definitely going up in popularity. Python, so it's interesting. Python is really an integration tool. A lot of scripting tools are integration tools. JavaScript is kind of in a unique place because it is the lingua franca of powering the web. Although WebAssembly, which we have a WebAssembly webinar coming up, that's not part of TCoffeeAndCode. Definitely check that out if you're interested in WebAssembly. WebAssembly is really making some big inroads, but Python is all about integrating things together. So interestingly, if you actually, Python itself is not a super efficient programming language, but but it does leverage all these native libraries that are really efficient. So when you're calling into the library and thinking the library do the work, then Python's fast. But when you're trying to do the code in Python, it's not near as fast. But that's one of the things I love about the Python for Delphi interface, is that it lets you use all these Python libraries natively from Delphi. And since they're native code libraries, you get that amazing performance. So that's another thing that's really a great benefit of integrating scripting, is that it gives you access to a broader range of libraries that you might not otherwise have access to. Let's see. Oh, and actually, one more thing. If you aren't familiar with PiScripter, definitely should check this IDE out, PiScripter, made in Delphi. I was aware of this. I knew it was made in Delphi, and I'd looked at it briefly. They just came out with a new 4.0 release a month ago, and actually I think there's another update coming here in the near future as well. But it's a really good Python IDE made in Delphi. It has so it has an immediate window down here at the bottom. And the really cool thing is, if you write some Python code and then set a breakpoint, and then you go down here and you can write in the immediate window and in the context of your script that's running. And it's so cool that you can write code to interact with a program while you're debugging it. That's another thing that's kind of cool about scripting engines as well, is that ability to dynamically do things.
That is a good point, Jim, is that scripting, because it's run interactively, in other words, line by line, that is one thing that, for those of us that have been in the industry for a long time, might remember that was the key feature of using BASIC. That BASIC, you could just break the code anytime, at any point in time, and you can just browse and check all the variables, and even continue executing from that point in time, because it was interpreted interactively. So for a few times, everybody went to compile code, and you forgot about that feature of advantage of having interpreted commands. And now with Python, everybody is saying, oh, now I can do this. Yeah, it was there all the time with the older languages, only that definitely Python is a much more advanced and modern language compared to the good old BASIC. But the feature of being interpreted and being able to break it at any time and check the state of your program and all variables, it reminds me of the good old quick basic and all those IDEs, which you could do exactly the same thing.
Yep.
And guess what? Something I was showing our audience last week is Fireduck has a scripting, SQL scripting engine, and because it's interpreted, it has the exact same feature. You can interrupt it at any time, and even with the built-in demo that it has, which is the script GUI runner, you can either step line by line on your script and see the results. You can even manually intercept it and then see what happened, or you can pause it and then go to your database engine and see if what you set it to do was actually done, and then confirm that the data has been posted, deleted, whatever, and then come back and continue running your script. So the idea of running this script, to me, is it's a step ahead even of the SQL Plus by Oracle. SQL Plus by Oracle is hard to break and then do some interactive checks. It's more manual, more cumbersome, but the script GUI utility that comes with Fireduck it combines the best of both worlds. So this GUI, it has an editor. You can step line by line or just run the whole script, and you can break it at any moment and either check it right there or go and yourself check it in your database engine. So these are the features of an interpreted language, which all scripting languages belong to. They are interpreted, so you automatically have this feature built in.
Yeah. So there's a comment here that says, what about using operating specific functionality not provided by Delphi itself? So there is, share my screen again. So there is DOS command. I've used this before. This is a great utility, or not great utility, great component suite for Delphi. And actually, I have a thought now that I'm wondering about. Could you, I would guess you could use DOS command to run PowerShell as well. So what this does is it creates a command window and lets you capture the output. So you can send commands to it and then read the commands back, and gives you much better control over interacting with a command shell, which I would, like I said, I would assume that you could do it with PowerShell as well, or really any console application. So definitely, if you are wanting to do that, take a look at that. I'm curious if anybody's used that with PowerShell, actually, now I think about it. Someone asked about what some of the other scripting languages people use. Clearly, Object Pascal is one of them. If you want to add just in the chat window what scripting languages you use that are in the other category, then we can kind of get a simple view of those there. Template engines. Conrad mentions template engines. Simpar Delphi template engine, which uses to generate email and web content. It also uses scripting, but mainly focused on generating of dynamic textual content based on the presentation of dynamic textual content based on presentated data, rather than just providing functions that can by application. Yeah, actually, I used to do a lot of template engine stuff. That is a really great thing to be aware of if you're not using template engines. You can do some of it with I can't remember what it's called, page producers in Delphi kind of give you some ability to templating as well. But yeah, template engines, very powerful stuff. I have not used the Simpar. I saw Simpar, so if you've used that, Conrad, I'd love your impressions of it. It sounds like you have used it. It looks really cool. Definitely something I want to check out. Roland's asking a question. It's kind of off topic here, but I'm going to go ahead and try and jump in here and answer it. He says, I haven't found the answer yet. How does one set up the deployment for a Mac OS application to integrate a .o or .dylib files that were compiled with GNU, C++ or similar? So you would need to, let me see if I can remember this correctly. Did I open? What did I do?
You need to open the deployment page
New
of the project. Yeah, create a project and then.
I broke my IDE.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know what I did. I was just playing with it earlier and I messed. Let me see. What did I do? I remember working at this one place, and it was working in Delphi, and we were building this line of business database application. And the manager was notorious for having clients in, and then coming over to walking up behind me as I'm working and saying, "Hey Jim, can you demo this feature for me real quick?" I'm like, I don't even know if it's going to compile right now. Something weird's going on here. Yeah, I messed something up. Weird. All right, I will fix that later. So I guess I won't jump into that now. Anyway, yeah, you can do it through the deployment. You can include it through the deployment manager, but then you would need to have the also the header file, right, so that you can interface with it. Were you going to add something more to that, Miguel?
I was trying to see if I have a sample code quickly here. I remember in the demos of Delphi, there's one of the demos of FireDAC for SQLite has exactly what we want to show, because that one compiles in multi-platform. And then when compiling a multi-platform on the deployment page, you can see that the Mac OS has those specific, it's added manually the entries for the SQLite library, the dynalib. So that's a pretty good example that our users audience can see because it's in the demos of Delphi.
Yeah. You want to open that up real quick? I just gave you, you can share your screen if you want to. If you want to,
okay.
if not.
Yeah, let me quickly find it. Please entertain the audience in the meantime. Let me just find it real quick, and then I'll show it to them.
Anybody launching Delphi or PowerScript shells, PowerShell Delphi. I would suggest looking at DOS command first for that. As far as doing that for creating a web interface, for example, interweb that provides simple interface together. So you can probably still use DOS command for that via a web interface like interweb. Interesting idea though. I've not tried that.
Yeah, I'm looking for it.
Luckily, I don't have a nasal voice. Yes, luckily. It's interesting. As far as my nose, it's a lot better than it was. But when I was this morning, I was showering and I go to dry off and rub my towel across the face. It's like, oh, ouch, ouch, that wasn't fun. It's not broken. It is just soft tissue damage. But yeah. Okay, awesome. Your screen up here.
Yeah, so continue, Jim. I'm looking for that code. I just shared the screen, and let me just quickly find that sample while you continue to explain, please.
Okay, headphones with in USB connectors. So this is a really nice high-end Ars Audio Technica professional headphone, and it's plugged into an XLR mixer. But every now and then I mess something up. So yeah, I'm not. It's not even. It's and it comes into the computers through USB. Scripting languages are like interpreted programming language. Delphi and C++ is compiler programming languages. This makes them faster and native. Yes. True. There were other scripting tools, don't remember the name, that was used mostly by login scripts and had basic like syntax. Yeah, I know what you're talking about, but I don't remember what that was. Well, would be like VBS, which I saw those a lot, and occasionally I see those still. Someone will have like some VBS script. I'm like, oh wow, blast from the past. So I was working at one company a while back in the IT department, and there was this guy that was retiring, and they're like, oh, this guy has written this software that he uses and a number of people use, and IT is going to need to take over it to support it. And we're like, oh, so we go check it out and see it, and it was like VB script and all sorts of really old. I was like, oh, this is going to be a lot of work to maintain. Luckily, it didn't require a lot of work, and we were able to move people onto different solutions. But yeah, John pointed out PowerShell core runs on Linux and Mac OS as well. Yeah, it does. And as far as I know, DOS command only works on Windows, although if you're interested in Python scripting, the Python for Delphi works on other platforms, not just Windows. So Chris is saying Python is now available on Cisco and Aruba LAN switches to automate tasks. Oh, wow, that's cool. Richard saying Ruby makes excellent general purpose scripting language. That is also true. I looked into the Ruby a while ago, but I haven't touched it in a long time. I need to look at Ruby again. So, funny story. I found this. I like to play Magic the Gathering. I haven't played it in a long time, so I kind of like to play it. I used to be bigger into it than I am. But somebody had made this utility for Magic the Gathering players it was a Windows. Actually, it may have been worked on Mac as well, but it had a GUI like a Windows GUI, and it was written in PHP. I did not know that was possible, but it was a desktop GUI application written in PHP. Yeah, Ruby's interesting because it was an interesting programming language. I remember looking at it, and then Ruby on Rails came out and just like derailed everything else Ruby related. It was like, if it wasn't Ruby on Rails, no one cared. But then Ruby on Rails is now kind of out of vogue, but Ruby's still a great programming language. Will there be any demo on combining scripting and native code? There was. I was going to do a demo with Python for Delphi. Maybe I still can, but my Delphi is not behaving appropriately. Terry says cannot type in chat. Oh. That's odd. So I guess put it in as a question that you what scripting languages you use, and I'll try and tell it out that way.
I have the sample code, Jim.
Okay. All right. Yeah, go ahead and walk us through that.
Yeah, so this is the sample that is, just let me show you the whole path. Is like a little, have to see the path. Let me just check it. This project is called Fireback SQL Lite. It's in the multi-devices. I'll share the full link based on your installation. If you go to Embarcadero RAD Studio samples, it's like it's nested like a 6 levels in. But this one sample is multi-platform, and you can see you can compile for any of the FireMonkey platforms that are supported. And on each one of the platforms, the deployment form, which you can open by going to project, then you go to deployment, is the second bottommost option under the project menu. Then you have this. Usually will be shown all configurations, which means all the platforms. But if you select only in this specific case macOS, then these are the files that will be deployed for macOS only. You can see in the grayed out area, these are added by the compiler itself, by the IDE. You cannot tamper with these ones because these are like a must-have. This must be there already. It includes one of them that's for supporting exceptions in macOS because it needs this additional assembler C++ compile library to support exception handling in macOS. So this is just an example of these libraries that get added. If you want to add one of your own, then once you are here on your macOS platform specific entry, then you click here on adding a file, and then you select the file that you need to add. I'll just take this as a sample, these text files, but it must be a dynamic library. If the library is being compiled in your Mac, you need to copy it manually, have it accessible in your Windows machine. Remember that the IDE is running on your Windows machine, not on the Mac. If you have the Mac path available via Parallels or VMware with some shared drive, go ahead. The point is that it's preferable that you have that in a subfolder in your project, so you are not relying on having the map drive that can be or not be connected at that point in time. So every time you compile your project, the file is right there. So I would suggest that in your own project, create a subdirectory and say macOS libraries or dynamic libraries, put that file, copy them there manually, and then you can add them here with this button. The same way I did with that text file. Then you open them up here. And the only catch here is where to point it to. So in macOS, there is a stricter rule than in Windows. So in macOS, there's only 2 choices to install a dynamic library. Is either in the system one or the application support library. So you just need to make sure that the path that you are typing here will reflect exactly that location. I remember I had to do something similar. And if you bear with me, I might be able to later send some link to the audience, but this is actually the way you do it. You just need to add that file here and make sure that the final destination points to a valid location. And unlike Windows, on macOS, you cannot just put the library on the executable file path. Must be either on the application support library or the system library directory. Usually, you should do it in the application support library path, and then you don't run into any issues with restrictions. There's the system one, you need to type your password and authenticate, authorize the system to overwrite over there. But the application support library folder is the one designed by Apple for your application dynamic libraries that must be there. Well, if you're asking for this, and I think you know that also your application, once loaded, if you are calling the built-in functions by macOS support, and you don't provide any path, that's what will happen. It will look either into the system libraries folder or in the application support libraries folder by default. So you don't need to do anything special. You just need to follow those rules in macOS.
Okay, I think I might have my Delphi fixed partially here. Thank you for doing that. Let me see if I can do this, and I'll do a demo here of Python for Delphi with being able to do scripting stuff. And I've done a few videos on this previously, so I'll do some basic stuff here, but then point you to that for more information. Tools, options. I'm gonna do one more thing here, and it should be good to go. So, Miguel, have you done anything with R Shiny interface? I'm familiar with R, but I have not done anything with R Shiny. Terry's asking about impossible to maintain with moving targets of R, so planning to create a user interface in Delphi that calls necessary R procedures. I'm assuming there is a library, a native library for R that you can access, like a DLL. Is that the case, Terry?
I think it's similar to the Python for Delphi. So it's something that links R with a GUI that you can interact with the user.
Yeah,
but I think his comment is good. The big difference is the Python for Delphi seems to have a good community that supports any change, because Python is evolving every day. So, but at least the community behind the project keeps it up to date. I'm not sure. I think the problems he's having with RShine is that there's not as good a community supporting that library as we have for Delphi, for Python for Delphi.
Yeah, that's probably the case. So here, let me share this here. I got this working, I think. Yes, all right. So, share screen, change presenter, me. So I have 3 monitors here, and go to webinar, renumbered them. It used to be this was 1 and this was 2, but now it renumbered it. Now this is 1. So that was why it was showing the wrong window earlier. Is it just changed the references? So I'm using Python for Delphi, and this is like I said, I did some webinars on this recently. That's the wrong window. So if you go to GitHub and look for PiScripter Python for Delphi, so here's PiScripter, and if you go to other library he has here is Python for Delphi. This is a framework, a library that lets you have a bidirectional integration between Python and Delphi. So Delphi can call into Python scripts or Python libraries just straightforward, and vice versa. Python can call into Delphi libraries that are prepared to be used with Python. So here is a simple demo here. You have the Python engine, which you point to what version of Python you're using here, and otherwise I think it automatically discovers whatever's installed in your system, but you can override it as well and change the DLL name and DLL path if you want to use a specific version. And then this here actually will take the output and redirect it into this memo here. So it's the output memo too. Otherwise, it's very basic. You can use synedit. This is just using a memo for the input here. But if I run this here, this is a simple Python script. So print 2 + 2, output 4. Very simple, but that's the basics of it. If there's interest, I'll put some links in for some of the videos I did on it. Actually, I can do that really quickly. I know where those are right now. But that's a great place to get started if you're wanting to add some scripting to your application as well. There's some other ones though. Let me get that list of, actually, if you go to tutorials, I think there is, yeah, here is, I'll put this in the chat window. If you go to tutorials on Python for Delphi, there are a link to some videos and some other stuff there that will just give you a great way to get started and give you the information you need. So that's a great option to get started with scripting in general, or Python, specifically with Python. As far as other options, if you're wanting to do scripting and you want to do Pascal script, there are a few great options for that. There's Delphi web script. I'll put a link in here for that. I could share the screen again. This is a great solution if you're wanting to do scripting without learning a different language. It lets you use a Delphi-inspired Object Pascal script, and this is actively maintained and used quite a bit.
This one is fantastic. Few Delphi developers use it, but once you use it, it's really powerful. I'm impressed the amount of effort Eric Grange and a couple of developers have made into this product.
Yep, yeah, this is a great one. And another one is Rem Objects has, I think it's just called Pascal script.
Yes, and this one is always freely available, even since they have the developer joining the team, they keep having this Pascal script freely available.
I don't remember where to find it at. Rem Objects Pascal script. I know it's on their site, but I can't remember how to get to it. There it is, Pascal script. And then there are other solutions like Smart Mobile Studio and Elevate. Elevate, Delphi, they have their Elevate web builder. That is a, at least I think they still have Elevate web builder. Let me look. Yep, Elevate web builder. And so this is a, it's a Delphi-inspired IDE that uses a Delphi-inspired Pascal script that transpiles to JavaScript, which is very similar to the one that TMS offers as well. TMS Web Core. So they have a Visual Studio Code support as well. They have one that's not Visual Studio. Yeah, right there. TMS Web. So this works from Delphi. It's the same, exact same functionality. Just you can either use it from Delphi or from Visual Studio Code.
I think it's worth mentioning, Jim, because it might confuse some of the audience of why are we talking about Pascal scripting on Delphi or Delphi? So what's the meaning or what's the usefulness of it? I don't know if our friend there has joined us recently, or he started from the beginning of this webinar, but we started saying that one of the key examples of how to use Pascal scripting is the reporting tools. So both fast reports and great reports, and now that they mentioned, yes, also a report builder, all of them have scripting built in. And the reason they include it is for more advanced functionality or for creating your own functions or your own results that need to be put on the report, or for dynamically changing the background color of a band, or for changing the font, or for making an element to show only on a specific set of conditions. They all include a scripting ability. So yes, you can create simple reports with just using the GUI designer with all these 3 report tools. But if you want to go a little further and have some advanced features, you must use the scripting engine. And since they all know, all these 3 vendors know that you are a Delphi developer, the scripting language that they give you is Object Pascal. But the point is this Object Pascal is not the Delphi's own. It's not being compiled in your program. It's actually provided by their own reporting engine. So they added this into their, either into their Delphi compiled units that you are using and linking into your program, or the DLL if you're using the version with dynamically loaded libraries. The point is that Pascal code is not running or being compiled by your Delphi IDE. It's being run by the reporting engine. So to you, it might look, yeah, it's the same thing. It's just that now this piece of code is sitting on the report instead of on my program, but it will be compiling to the executable. No, actually what will happen is that piece of code that you define on your reporter will be saved with the report file and embedded in the report file. And when you run and execute that report, the reporting engine will take that script text file out of the report file contents and execute it in its own engine, totally separate and independent of the code that you compiling in your executable. So this must be misleading for some users, but yes, because to you it's Pascal, it's the same thing. But the thing is, this is being provided by the reporting engine, by the reporting vendor, not by the IDE. But since you are a Delphi developer, they're providing you something you're familiar with. So Object Pascal is the solution in this case, because you are a Delphi developer. But by the same token, if your users require some scripting, because let's say you're creating an invoice application and your application is fairly complex, but still you want to provide them some scripting, some way that they can define whether the banding or some of the line items in the invoice can show up or not. These basic things that become annoying to implement by having a very advanced configuration and having a lot of options. Instead of going with tons of options, to just include one of these scripting components that Jim has shown in his screen. So any of these scripting engines, you add a component, it's a non-visual component that you add into your application, and somehow you link it. Most of them, you must link it to a memo component, something where the user can edit and add their own script commands. And then with some button or some visual component, you make the run engine, the scripting engine that you added into your application. You, by pushing the button, you make the memo contents, the scripting commands that the user typed, load it into the actual engine component and execute it. This is the point. This is dynamically launched and executed by the end user, not by you. And they will run whatever they want at will, provided you enable the commands that have the scripting engine. Now, this is one good point about the scripting engine. They will provide you with a full set of commands, functions, and subsets. But if you just want to provide a very small set of the functions that they have, all these scripting components allow you in the configuration when compiling saying disable this command, disable this. So finally, the end user will be able to run only those that you finally expose or enabled in the engine. And there's also some basic syntax checking done by the component. So the component will give an error on the screen saying, hey, the command on line number 4 is has a typo or is wrong syntax, whatever. But I would say again that the most familiar thing that we as Delphi developers can see as where is a scripting engine using Pascal is the reporting tools. There's a lot more out there, but these are the ones that I would say almost every single Delphi developer has used and are familiar with.
Yeah, your comment about the reporting is actually something I hadn't thought about in talking about this. So I'm glad you came on and mentioned that. But the ability, so the main things I see about adding scripting is a way that you can give your end users the ability to add late bound functionality, I guess you could say, right? Where you give them the ability to customize the behavior of your application. So you can't give them your IDE and all your source code and let them recompile it if they want to make changes to functionality. But by giving them a scripting engine, they can add changes on their own. So it gives them more power as well. But then, yeah, reporting is a big one. And it's used a lot in like web frameworks and stuff like that. Ken's asking here about JavaScript and native Delphi code. And there is a, I will share this out here. There's a blog post here on 6 JavaScript frameworks for Delphi. This is specifically 10.2 Tokyo, but I think all this will still work. Although PAX compiler is now part of Apex Systems, and they're working on a new release. He was hoping to be on today, but wasn't able to be on here to show off what they're doing. But JS Engine, this one's by Winsoft. If you're not, this is another one of those you're probably doing it the hard way if you're not familiar with Winsoft, because they have, I'll just show you some of their components here. They have so many Delphi components doing all sorts of great stuff here. And I've used a few of them and they're really cool. And I've talked to a number of people that are like, hey, I'm looking for a way to do this. And I'm like, I think Winsoft has a component. And they go look and they're like, oh my goodness. And they go get it. And they're like, oh, this is amazing. I'm so happy for it. So this is, they have a great selection of components here. And here is their JS engine that uses the Microsoft Chakra Core JavaScript engine and supports Windows 32 and Windows 60-bit, 64-bit applications to embed and control JavaScript right from your program. So you could, in this case, have scripts edited by users that can be executed, or you could have other scripts that you're calling from your code that you're able to control. So that is a great solution. Here's another one here, ScriptGate is an open source one, and there was another one, V8 Delphi wrapper is another one that's open source that does Delphi. So check those out. I haven't used them lately, but they were working with Tokyo apparently, so I'm guessing they still work with 10.4. And here's another one that talks about the ScriptGate. So some great stuff there for JavaScript integration. So Ken has a question about MATLAB plots appearing inside a Delphi canvas. Now, if I remember correctly, lab plot, I think there is a, if I spell it correctly, oops, yeah. So I think, I'm not positive, but if you go to here, one of these tutorials, I think actually he shows exactly that, is how to use MATLAB from Delphi through JavaScript. And he renders it, I think, on a Delphi canvas from there. So that's why I would suggest taking a look at that. There's probably another way to go directly to MATLAB, but that's just something offhand I could think of as far as ways to do that. Isn't there a Delphi from library where you can define, configure your own scripting language? It drills down to command parser with arguments. Oh gosh, I think there is. Oh, so actually something I will point out before I switch off Python for Delphi is that sample I showed you is a really basic one. But if you go in here, I think one of these is a video I made that shows how to write a have your Python script that modifies your Delphi application. So you can actually pass a object from Delphi into your Python script, and then the Python script can modify it. So what you can do is actually give the Python script access to your GUI for your application, and then the Python script can like move buttons around and click buttons and change things or interact with any objects. So it really powerful functionality there. So I think the TMS scripter no, it doesn't. So it supports 2 scripting languages, but doesn't let you make your own scripting language. Gosh, it seems like I remember one that did that lets you make your own scripting language with Delphi. Are you familiar with one that does that, Miguel?
Say that again, please.
A Delphi component that lets you make your own scripting language that gives you like parsing and it seems like I remember where it is.
TMS Script Studio. I think good point. And let me just go a little bit back before I reply to your question. But one of the differences between the choices that you have when you decide to have Object Pascal as your scripting language in your application, the key differences is all of them will give you the basic Object Pascal feature immediately, like even Pascal script, the free one available from Brem Studio, from Brem Objects, will give you a scripting working Object Pascal. But TMS Script Studio, they gone the extra mile. And yes, you have the basic Object Pascal scripting language, but they also went to what they call it scripting forms. So you can, with the scripting language, create forms and store forms, and you can even load them up from DFM files, Delphi files. So if you need that in your application, that also the forms can be dynamically created by the end user, TMS Script Studio has that. And in addition to that, the scripting engine in TMS Script Studio is based on a framework with a parser, a tree parser, the tree analyzer. So that component is there, and you can take the example of how they implemented the Object Pascal language based on that. So this parser is abstract, and then it's a foundation for you to add your own language, whichever you want. You just need to follow the example. There's actually an example in a demo there of how to do a very simple language. So it takes this basic abstract tree parser. You define your tokens and your syntax of your language, and then by defining the rules in the tokenizer, then you're actually telling the rules of your language. Now, what to do with the language? Then you need to define and override all the classes and all the functions that define the parser. It's kind of a challenging task, but if you know what you're doing, TMS Script Studio provides the foundation. So you only go straight to defining your language rather than reinventing the wheel from scratch by creating the parser and all those, the foundation for making your own scripting language. That's the one that I remember has that feature that helps you by going halfway of what you need to do in order to have your own scripting language. You just add the other half, which is your own implementation with your own syntax rules and your own tokens.
Yep, yeah. And actually that reminds me that you can do with, I know Python for Delphi, and I believe some of the other JavaScript ones, you can define your own functions that you pass into the scripting language. So, you know, you're still using the syntax of Python or JavaScript, but you call the functions that it calls, you can define those in Delphi, write them in Delphi and expose those functions to it, and, you know, make it very extensible. So Gerhard Schwartz, another MVP, thanks for joining us, Gerhard, says Swig for C++ builder. I'm not familiar with this. Let me bring it up here. Share my screen. Okay. Swig is a tool that connects with programs written in C and C++ with high-level programming languages, JavaScript, Perl, PHP. Okay. I have not tried it with C++ Builder, but I probably would work. Very cool.
For those that are asking, Jim, I have a quick sample here of the scripting done with FireDAC, which is another scripting. Now you're talking about SQL instead of Pascal or JavaScript.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, please show that. That'd be great.
Okay. Can you see it now?
Yes.
All right. So just for the audience, I'm using here the FireDAC Explorer, which is available on your tools. If you have used this Explorer, you know what I'm talking about. If not, it's available under the tools menu in your Delphi IDE. And there at the bottom half, you'll find FireDAC Explorer. This allows you to explore based on the connections that you have defined right here. So here I have created a simple entry that calls SQL my app. So this is for pointing to an SQLite library database that is sitting on my D drive in a directory called my app, and then the database is called my app data SQLite tree. So I created this definition. Right now it's connected. It's empty, so no tables, but the database is there. So separately, I'm running one of the demo tools that comes with FireDAC. This is called Script GUI, meaning is the GUI graphical user interface script runner by FireDAC. I'm gonna load a script that I prepared. It's a very simple script of what you can do with this utility. So I loaded the script. You can see that is SQL commands with a mix of scripting commands that are borrowed from SQL Plus of Oracle, like this REM remarks is borrowed from them. So they're exactly that, remarks. So what you see here is a script, SQL script that is able to be executed by FireDAC. And again, the beauty of scripting is that you can either run it all in one step, run it all completely, which is what you would do in your program once you are running a script for achieving a specific task. Or what I'm going to show you right here is when you are developing it or debugging it and checking that it does what you intended to do, then you can just step it. So you have the buttons here, and this is F7 is to step it one by one. I'm not sure if you'll be able to watch the cursor.
Someone asked earlier about that you can set breakpoints and step through compiled Delphi code, but with scripting, you can actually change it and keep stepping, which is
yes,
pretty cool
that is
stuff.
Correct, because it's been interpreted on the fly. Yes, so this is, it holds true even for this one. I just stepped over these REMs. Since these are remarks, they are doing nothing. But are you able to see the cursor, Jim?
I don't see
or
the cursor.
Is it too tiny? It's too tiny, right? So yeah. Well, the cursor is right here.
I do see the cursor. Yes, I do see it. It's just really tiny. You're right.
Yeah, it's tiny, but it's there. So I'm stepping line by line. So it's jumping through the REMs right now. But then you'll see it'll go to that first SQL command. Actually, this is not an SQL command. This is a FireDAC command for connecting to a specific database. These parameters here are semicolon separated parameters, which are exactly the same ones that you would define here with FireDAC Explorer. So if you know how to work with the FireDAC components, then you know what I'm talking about. The parameters that you define here are the ones that you define here with semicolon separated. What it will do is connect to that same database that I have here in the Explorer, only this is done through the script. So I have them side by side. So in this one step, it's connecting, but it's locked because I'm using it now. Yeah, I didn't put share. Okay, let me just close it temporarily. So I mean, I'm able to run the script. And then again, it's a script. So I put the cursor just on top of that line. So I execute it again. It's locked. I now have to exit it. Hold on 1 second. So I exit this one. So it unlocks the access to the database. And now it opens it up. And here I just had to put the cursor on top of the line and run it again. And it succeeded. So the point is, this is one of the beauties of scripting. You can step over the lines at any time and then go back and change it dynamically. I'll step it again and to the next sentences. Here you see SQL DDL, data definition language that will create tables. So I'm creating the table country here, create it. And then I'm creating another table here called customer, create it. I'm stepping with F7, which is in this GUI tool, that's the key attached to stepping, F7. I'm scrolling the content so you can see. So the next one will be creating the table department. I'm stepping over it. It created the table. Next command is this employee. So I step over it. It creates the table employee. Next one is salary history. Then sales. Each time I press the F7, I'm stepping over the whole command. So the FireDAC scripting engine will parse the full command until it finds a semicolon, which is the terminator, which defines that the command ends right there. So this way you can have a multiple line SQL command, which is very handy in SQL. It's very cumbersome to have a single line with a very long SQL command. So you can wrap the lines as much as you want. You just need to remember to add the semicolon in the very last line of the SQL query or whatever that you are defining here. And then FireDAC will be just fine. It'll parse all the lines until it finds the terminator, the semicolon, which, by the way, is configurable. If you don't like the terminator because you are an SQL Server developer and you prefer the Go command, you can do that. You can change the definition of the terminators. There are some good samples in the FireDAC folders, demos, and shows that kind of example of how you can change the terminator definition in case you are more familiar with a different one. That semicolon seems to be the standard other than SQL Server, meaning Oracle, Postgre, and all the rest use semicolon as a line terminator. Let me just finish this. Now I'm creating the indexes of those. I'll go faster right now. And just showing to you that when creating these scripts, if something goes wrong, that's just like when doing the connection, it would be locked and it didn't succeed. You can just go back and try again and fix whatever you need. If the command had a syntax error, you just change the syntax right there and execute it again until it works. And then this is all done interactively. You don't need to compile anything. So this is the beauty of the scripting engines, that they are interactive because they're being interpreted on the fly. So I'll just finish running this. So I'm creating the indexes for these ones. So this script creates a full database that is created from scratch, meaning, okay, here is trying to load data. I don't have the files, but there are some commands here built in FireDAC. If you have a CSV file with the data, which I didn't put right now in the right directory, please bear with me, forgive me about that. I'll try to show you that later. But this command will load data from a CSV text file into that table that I just created some lines above. And the idea of this script is that at the very end, you have a fully working database with some data preloaded and ready to be used by your application. This is a way to have a setup done by your app that is usually very difficult to do with installers. Why? Because with SQLite, you can distribute the actual database file, so it would be like an overkill to do this. But in case you have SQL Server or you are supporting Oracle or Postgre, you cannot do that. You cannot deploy the database file. You must run a script like this. So in order for your application to prepare and create the tables and the schema and whatnot that you need to have in your application, then this script is a good example of how to do that when you install your application the first time. And then you develop and create and debug it by using this GUI script utility by FireDAC.
You know, I haven't messed. I remember you showing this before and being totally blown away by it, and then I have not messed with it since then. But it's interesting. Alf was pointing out that DB Power Studio gives you ability to debug SQL procedures, and so DB Power Studio is a great product. Don't get me wrong, but I am oftentimes blown away by the power just in FireDAC in Delphi. That you can do stuff that you don't have to actually make an application. You're just using the tools that are included with FireDAC, and you could like stuff like this is great. So I'm not trying to say don't buy DB Power Studio, but it's
yeah,
your weapon, all the cool stuff you can do with FireDAC just without really having to write a lot of code to use it. So Dieter, another one of our amazing MVPs, pointed out that JVCL has the RxLib now, which I've used RxLib years ago, and I have totally forgotten about it. It is now in part of JVCL now, and Dieter, I'm going to need to connect with you and have you do a demo for me because I totally forgot all about that. Just to get a refresher on that, but yeah, very cool stuff. Check out RxLib in JVCL as well. Actually, I think I have JVCL installed here on my computer. I don't see it. There's a demo though. Yeah, I do have JVCL installed, but so JCL and JVCL is one of those things that has, and TurboPack. So those three open source libraries have so much functionality in them. I guess TurboPack's a collection of libraries, but really, really worth being familiar with. And I don't think anybody really knows everything that's in JVCL and JCL anymore. They're so massive. But yeah, Alf says FireDAC and DB Power Studio are complementary. Yeah, I haven't used DB Power Studio a lot, but I've worked with some people internally that have done some demos and stuff like that with it and shown some things off about it. And I know a number of our customers, including Alf, use it as well, and it's a great product. I used to use ER Studio. Well, Yeah, I used ER Studio briefly years ago. It's been feeling old lately. Although I was just talking with my daughter, my 16-year-old daughter, the other day, and she was sharing something with me, and I was trying to be a good parent, and I was just like, wait a second, I'm not an adult, I can't do this. I don't know if anybody else has that, where you're technically an adult or a parent or a responsible person, and just all of a sudden like, I'm making this up as I go along. I have no idea what I'm doing. I mean, that's just a me thing. Anyway, gosh, I need to. Dieter just left. All right, I'm going to connect to Dieter later and say, hey, show me this RxLib again, because I totally forgot about it. I remember using RxLib. I want to say it was like Delphi 7 time period, and doing some amazing cool stuff with it and being like, this is awesome, but I have not touched it since then. So I actually went and looked, because I had to remember the FireDAC Explorer is from the tools menu. I'd forgotten about that. I don't come in here and use this often enough. I just can't. There's too much. I'm glad you're on here, Miguel. There's too much for me to keep it all in my head anymore.
They're asking about what? FireDAC?
Oh, I was just, you'd shown off FireDAC Explorer, and I was just saying I had to go look because I couldn't remember where it was. It's Tools, FireDAC Explorer, and FireDAC Monitor are there.
Yeah. Yes. Oh no, Monitor is one, and this is Explorer. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Yes.
So
there's
the Tools window, the Script GUI Plus. Is that from FireDAC Explorer?
No. Yeah. Sorry about the confusion. The FireDAC Explorer. Let me just show quickly, so it's easier for the people to remember. When you are in your IDE, Tools will give you the Explorer, which is the one you can use to create connections.
Right.
And here you are actually exploring the code, right, which is similar to the built-in Explorer of the IDE. Actually, this functionality has been merged into the IDE, but it's a separate tool if you want, like the one I'm running right now. And it's available right there from the Tools option. So this is the Explorer. You can create new definitions of your databases, play with them, and even run some simple scripts here. This is the Explorer.
Right.
Another utility you have right here is Monitor. So if you enabled monitoring on the components on your application, then this is the actual, let's say, the server component that will connect to your application. If some of you have done this, this is a very powerful feature of FireDAC. When you want to know what your application is doing when communicating with the SQL server of your preference, then in the FireDAC connection component, you add a FireDAC monitor component. It's a brother component, it's a sibling, and then you connect them. In the actual connection, there's a property that you can connect it to the monitor. If you do that, then this tool that I'm showing you right here will connect to that component on the fly when you run your application, and then you have a live feed here of all the SQL commands that your application are sending live to the SQL server. So it's a way to, it's like an inspector. It will be inspecting and monitoring all the activity of your FireDAC component in your application. It's a very powerful tool, but you need to do those extra steps. You need to drop in the monitor component in your application, connect it to your connection, and then define here this, in this server, launch it, and then this server will automatically find available components in your computer that are right now active, and then you will see the feed of those commands right here. That's a very powerful feature. I was going
to say, can you use Monitor from a mobile app? So if I'm building a mobile app, can I have with FireDAC, like talking to SQLite or Interbase, can I use the Monitor component to talk to FireDAC or talk to it from there?
No, because the problem is they need to be available in the same subnet. So the problem is when you're running your mobile applications, they are automatically in a separate subnet, so it won't find it directly. I saw a trick to do that. I don't recall. It has to do with defining that the subnet where your mobile application is is forced to be on the same one as your Windows machine, and then it has to do with IP routing. In other words, that the monitor component can see the mobile application. But what I have not confirmed is whether the monitor component works in all the mobile applications. I'm not sure about that.
Yeah.
And to finish what it was, yeah.
Oh,
go ahead.
How do you get the script GUI window you were showing?
Yeah, that's what I was going to finish. So I show the two tools that are available right here is the Explorer and the Monitor. The script GUI is a demo application under FireDAC. So let me just take the application. So is Object Pascal, is database, FireDAC, samples, component layer, script. And here you have the console runner and the GUI runner. This is it.
Oh, okay.
So it's actually a demo app under the FireDAC master folder.
I love.
So this is the application, you compile it, and then you run it.
I love that that's such a powerful thing, and it's a demo that's included with it's just it just get tickled by that. That's amazing. All
and
right,
that's what I learned about it, Jim, that most Delphi developers don't know that this thing is right there. But that's why later we might need to have a webinar to expose them more clearly how to use it.
We need to do more with showing off FireDAC. FireDAC is so amazing. It's when we first launched, so FireDAC actually became part of Delphi Rad Studio right before I joined Embarcadero, and right after I joined, I was talking to Kerry Jensen and saying, "Hey, you haven't done much about talk about FireDAC." He's like, "Well, I'm not really familiar with it yet, but when I get, I'll take a look at it. I don't want to talk about anything I'm not familiar with." I'm like, "Okay, that's fair enough." And later on, he was telling me he was on site consulting with somebody, and they were using an old version of AnyDAC, and they're having some strange behavior. And he's like, "Well, FireDAC should be a drop-in replacement for that, and maybe they've addressed some of those things, so let's do that." And so that's when he started. He probably done a little bit with FireDAC before that. I know Kerry, he's fairly well abreast of things, but dropped in, had them upgrade to FireDAC, the latest version of FireDAC, and he said it fixed everything. It was like his consulting job was done because it fixed all the performance problems that were like that. So he's just, anytime anybody talked to him after that, he's like, "Are you using the latest version of FireDAC?" No, use the latest version of FireDAC first, then we'll talk, because it's such a great tool. But he wrote a book on it too. Yeah.
Yes, and at one point again, Jim, this only shows that the scripting concept is so wide open. In other words, you can have scripting for gaming, you can have scripting for the reporting tools, you can have scripting for some advanced functionality for the end users, you can have scripting for a operating system batch job, you can have scripting for invoicing, electronic invoicing, advanced features, you can have scripting for your installer, and last but not least, you can have a scripting for your GUI operational, your SQL operationals. Any Delphi developer that has dwelt themselves into running heavy database applications has gone into the nightmare of embedding long SQL commands in the Delphi code with a chain of strings attached with a plus. And it's, you get the job done, but it's very cumbersome to do that versus just dropping a script component and embedding the text right there. Because having this component doesn't mean that you must connect it to a memo. That if you have interactivity with the user. But there's nothing stopping you from having the script component and just tie it to some constant defined SQL commands right there in your code. And you just feed them directly to the script engine. So whether you do it interactively with a memo component or do it with a constants defined in your program, that's up to you. But the point is that the script engine then will run all those commands in sequence. And especially since you have already, one thing you can do is upload your script as a resource file and into your Delphi program, and then it's not exposed to the end user. And the file is the one that you are running in this SQL script GUI. So you can debug it and test it in the script GUI. And then that final script file, you just add it as a resource into your application and then feed it to the script engine at runtime. So it's totally hidden to the user, but you are providing a much complex feature, especially like this one that I show is a sample of how to create a complete database from scratch on a server engine that doesn't have those tables and those indexes and data.
Yeah, actually, I've been using this FD script component and put it, because you can go in there and add multiple scripts inside of it, inside the component, but doing it as resources, that's a really brilliant idea, because then it gives you the ability to open that SQL file outside of the IDE in
Exactly.
like or whatever and work
and use this script GUI for testing and debugging it, and then your final file you just add it as a resource. Yes, that if you choose to do it like the way I show it, and that makes it seamlessly and simple, and you are not exposing it to the end user. In other words, you're not creating memos, you're not putting any interactivity, but it's up to you. You have the power either way, either because you're exposing that feature to your end users, or because you are using this power to facilitate yourself into complex steps, especially in database world. You always end up with this kind of scripting things. Only that in the past, we do it step by step, but individually sending those SQL commands to the either the DB Express component or the good old DBE, whatever. You were doing it manually one by one in code. But now you can just define the whole script file and then use the script engine component to run it at once.
Mm-hmm. Ken said, I need a Delphi for Dummies book. Actually, there was a Delphi, I think it was Delphi 3 for Dummies book a while back. I'm always looking stuff up when I'm doing stuff with Delphi. And I was reading I saw a tweet from somebody that built some JavaScript framework, or something like that. And they commented that they frequently, when they're trying to use the framework they wrote, they're still using Google and searching how to use it. Because we cannot keep it all in our heads anymore. It's just way too much.
Yeah.
So the TJV script holder to load strings property can have a text file. Oh, fantastic. That would be great. Yeah. All right. I know we have 20 minutes left, so unless someone has any questions, I would just soon wrap up here a little bit early. We covered a lot of stuff here, and I don't know about you, my brain's full. I learned a lot too, so this is great, Miguel. Thank you. So Dieter says RxLib changed its name when it was integrated with JVCL components to now Rx JV Interpreter Program Interpreter FM. Okay, fantastic.
By the way, one of our audience was asking about calling operating system scripts, namely PowerShell or batch files or any that is run by the operating system. I would recommend that you can use direct calls from the RTL, like calling a process as a process. The only point about using the RTL is it's a little blind. In other words, the process will run, but you won't see anything. You will just get a return code, whether it succeeded or not. Normal DOS or command line return code. If you want to have something visual of what it is doing, JCL has a very nice component that allows you to run external processes, in this case, calling batch files or PowerShell files. And then you can define optionally in their function, you can define a callback function that will dump it to, if you do it right, they have a good demo, you can define it to a function that you define in your code that updates a memo or a list view. And then visually on your program, you have the text version of what the command is doing externally. So that's pretty neat and nice. In case you do want that, you have a visual visibility of what the command is doing. So it's like a small window that shows what the command is doing, because this command from JCL, the actual text output of that script is being fed back to your program through this callback procedure, and then you on your code just add it to a memo or to a list view, and then you can see exactly what the command is doing.
What is that component? Because I've used DOSBox. Nice option. But what was that one called? I'm sorry. I used DOSBox.
GCL. I'm talking the GCL has some 2 or 3 demos. GCL, the Jedi C component library. They have demos when you call a sub process, there's a callback function that in the demos is very nicely shown. Then in your program, you intercept that callback function and you just update a memo or a list view. So that means that whatever the command is outputting as a text, then you are able to feed it back into your program by showing it in a component. So it's like
Cool.
having a window of what it is doing.
You know, JCL and JVCL could be a big thick book just on their own, covering those.
Yeah.
So much in there. So, all right, fantastic.
Yes.
Well, thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you to, a lot of the questions were answering other people's questions. So thank you for everybody that was contributing answers and comments. And thank you, Miguel, for coming out and joining as well and helping out with things. I really appreciate it. Thanks to all the
Thank you.
Everybody doing all the great stuff out there. So.
Well, thank you for organizing this TCoffeeAndCode stream. Seems many people share a lot of ideas, and the format has been very popular and successful.
That's what I like about this is it's just a come and hang out and then we'll chat about stuff and answer questions. So very cool. So I guess reminder, next week we have, where'd my window go with my slide? Next week is connecting to the Internet of Things, and it sounds like Miguel will probably be back for that since that's what you're working on a lot.
Exactly. Yeah, I may be back here along with other MVPs that are also working in this same area arena.
Lots of great stuff out there. Lots of cool things going on. So anyway, see you all next week, and thanks for everything you do, and I'll catch you all later.
And thank you everybody for being here with us. Bye.